This show is strictly for educational purposes. The opinions expressed on the show are personal to the individuals appearing in the show and not those of Thinking Tree Ecoholics Private Limited. The show is not intended to offend or defame any individual, entity, caste, community, race, or religion, or to denigrate any institution, person, living or dead. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
Hello and welcome to Ecoholics, the Thinking Tree series, a platform where we invite intellectuals and professionals to talk about various economic issues. In today's discussion, we are going to learn about various concepts of environmental economics, and to share the words of enlightenment, we have with us Professor Sanjeev Purohit sir. Professor Sanjeev Purohit is a senior fellow at National Council of Applied Economic Research. He is an experienced modeler in the area of trade and environment with over more than 20 years of modeling experience. His domain of research experience includes trade, energy, environment, climate change, and South Asian integration. He has also worked with CSIR, National Institute of Science, Technology and Development Studies, and has also served as a member of several committees of Government of India, including Climate Change Modeling Group of Ministry of Environment and Forests. A very hearty welcome to you, sir. We are really elated to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
So I would begin with the very first question that I have in mind is, amidst these different environmental issues like global warming and climate change, students learning environmental economics are constantly taught about various environmental policy instruments for tackling such issues and problems. I would like to ask you, sir, whether these instruments are really apt or really good realistically, and how are they being used in India exclusively?
Yeah, first of all, I think one thing everyone should know that climate change is a long time kind of thing. Nothing will come in short term. And this is the end problem. See, for the politicians, whenever they go to any kind of project, any innovation, they can easily see, if I do this kind of project, I get this much job created, this much income is generated, society of this. Right. Problem with the environment, you can't can't see these things. This will come a long time. Suppose, right. And that is a basic problem to do it. On an instrument, why politicians are not quick to do it. They always look at the cost.
Right.
Benefits are coming in long term, which are not in their 5-year terms of a politician or something, if you're a member or an MP. And that is a basic problem.
Right.
But nowadays, with kind of mind of changes, people are trying to slowly begin to centralize to this environmental problem. As we can see now, a lot of media articles are getting civil society as more active to doing this kind of environmental changes. And that is a good thing. And probably this will take place slowly.
Right, right. Absolutely.
Problem that this kind of instrument, what he was telling, environmental, there are two kinds of instruments are there. I think command and control kind, or a kind of market kind of mechanism.
Market, yes.
Kind of mechanism. But the market decides how much we engage. But India is basically, or many of the countries do a kind of command of control system. Or you dictate, you have to do this kind of. Take, for example, like this, in Delhi, kind that you can't run a petrol car more than 15 years. So this is a common kind of system. Problem with this kind of system is that you don't know that, suppose a car is sitting idle. Is a retired person. Yeah, this is 5,000 kilometers. But at the 15 years kind of system, it car has to be replaced. We doesn't look at the productivity of the capital. Yeah, what I think is kind of problem that now because of the command control system, if you have a 15 years old car, you have to replace it. It doesn't look at the quality of the car, pollution. If the car is not running at all, for suppose a retired person has this car, and probably he has only 5,000 or 10,000 kilometers will run on 15 years, something like that. It could be like that. But then also his car has to be replaced, which is not efficient use of capital. It's unproductive use of capital. We should not be encouraged. But the problem with the command and control systems, if you have this kind of diktat, 15 years car has to be replaced. This kind of systems creeps in, which is not an efficient way of running an economy.
Right, right. These systems actually come in environmental valuation, I think.
Yeah. A valuation question. Its question is like the diktat. 15 years you have to replace. It doesn't look at the whether you are polluting or non-polluting. That's the questions.
That is the question. All right, sir.
This is called the command dot control system.
Okay. So, sir, while we talk about India, are we really practically using any of such methodologies when we talk about environmental protection or environmental economics, or it is just in theory that we are there?
No, see, one of the fine example of this kind of this energy efficient employment is this starting of this all this kind of electrical equipment that comes with a 5-star, 3-star, 4-star.
Right.
It's a fine example of this kind of rating system.
Right, absolutely.
More energy efficient, if a consumer can know which is more energy efficient instrument, he can buy
all
it.
Different products are actually 5-star and 4-star, and
4-star.
these days actually consumers are going for the higher star just because to save the electricity bill also. So absolutely.
This is a perfect example of these things.
Yeah.
So we are doing it, this kind of thing, but not slowly we are trying to do it.
Of course, gradually. Absolutely. So my next question to you is that there is always a trade-off that is being talked about between economic growth and environmental degradation or environment, if we say generically. Can we find or hope for a certain win-win situation where we can also grow along with environmental protection, or there can be some amount of coexistence in the economy in the future?
It depends on kind of, see, you can't say blanket, but there are some sectors where you can, this kind of things is very much applicable.
Okay.
For example, like some of the energy intensive sector like cement. Earlier, when people are not ever concerned about the energy, wastage, etc., they never had to use the heat losses. Now they try to recover the heat losses in the production process.
Right.
For example, if there is a penalty like water uses, etc., probably you want to clean their wastewater and recycle this.
Yeah.
So these kind of things are not slowly taking place in the mind. I know people, you can see a lot of wastewater getting recycled for use for gardening and for other purposes.
Right.
So there are other benefits are there. In not one, there are win-win solutions. Some sector definitely are win sector. Some sector there are not. But some sector is a long time, like for example recycle. For example, if you look at the biofuel sector, etc., there are a lot of job potentials are there in the sector. So if you use this kind of renewable fuel like biodiesel, etc., use it, there are a lot of benefits are there. It's a win-win solutions.
Right. Actually,
so you can't say there. Growth, there is a balance you can, in any case you have to do it, otherwise you can see kind of climate change effect is happening. Another 50 years will be more serious, people will be more serious about these issues.
Of course. It is only after a necessity arises then we
start. Obviously.
So
obviously, I mean, it's like this, for example, before the IC engine came about, people used to do the steam engine. So those necessity comes is actually people changes and see what are the benefits.
Yes.
Unless we would thought about the solar energy, etc.
Right. But of course, there are a lot of hopes because we have come up with solid waste management systems in some cities and water recycling system in some colonies. So I think there goes the hope for the better future.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the very similar context, while we are talking about the pollution and we are talking about penalties and all, economists often point out that pollution permits that exist in the economy are better than applying any pollution taxes. So what is your take on which of it should be favorable, pollution permits or pollution taxes?
See, one of the disadvantage of the pollution tax is it's a static efficiency. It doesn't give a dynamic things. But problem, if you get permit, you can have a dynamic gains.
Right.
Suppose a pollution tax, suppose I have to reduce my pollution by 10% in a production percentage. I will only do that, not more than that. But if you get permit, if I reduce more pollution, then I get a benefit in the society. I can extend that permit to other sectors.
Right.
So there is incentive for a dynamic kind of efficiency.
Right.
But problem, there is other pitfalls on these things.
Okay.
Take the Kyoto protocols. But there are developed countries the choice. Either you reduce your pollution at your home, or you reduce the pollution in the developing country by spending some money. Problem that these kind of things when it start, no new technology came up.
Right.
No developed country invest on technology development for this. They just, because that is cheaper from that. So there's a bad thing of this kind of permit. If you go within a country, it's fine. But if you say that this kind of permit, you can get the benefit by investing some money in developing country, that's not a good practice, I say, which happened in the Kyoto. So those kind of development in technology did not come around, like development in the battery technology.
Right.
Because one of the problem with the solar technology is that there is no efficient battery storage. The storage, they never take up because of Kyoto Protocol.
Okay.
They spend some money to invest some solar plant in developing country, that's it.
Okay.
Otherwise, if you have there spending money, you have to do it within a national boundary. After all, they are the innovation powerhouse. If they don't innovate, you can't have a new technology.
Right. And of course, there's a lot of gaga among developing and underdeveloped and of course developed nations about how we can convert now, how can we go for alternative sources of energy. So I think then, of course, someday we will have to approach those technologies because we have a limited potential or limited stock of fossil fuels. So we are going to definitely go for that, and of course then there might be some other policies that would be made for their conservation or their betterment. So while also talking about this, there's also one question that comes in mind is when we talk about the environmental Kuznets curve that normally students write the answers about while talking about coexistence between environment or economic growth. So could you just give suggestions to students how they can approach to a question like this, because environmental Kuznets curve is like a basic theory and there's only just a basic concept of how environmental degradation and economic growth go hand in hand, and then after a point of time they gradually just cease to exist, or environmental degradation cease to exist. But in this particular scenario or the present scenario, when we are talking about so much about climatic change and global warming, it is very hard to accept the fact that it is technically going to cease to exist. So any take on that scenario, how students can approach to such a question or such a coexistence question in their papers?
See, I think in the Kuznets curve, the growth of technology was not so much understood.
Right.
Because now the way the technology are getting a new kind of source, it is not at all clear. Like see the source of energy. There's so many new kind of energy forms are being discovered every day.
Absolutely.
And this I think technology is taking more of the things, because I think 20 years back, I think for 50 years back, one is to ask that there won't be enough food in the world to feed the people.
Right.
But you said there no kind of thing is happening. So I think technology is winning the race, I used to say.
Absolutely. That's an interesting insight, of course. Nice statement. So my next question, sir, is environmentalists worry about the decrease in natural resources. And of course, different economies also worry about how resources would be managed in the future. We already know that coal and other fossil fuels are already near exhaustion in some countries. Now, how can we assure to have a public policy which would facilitate something like socially optimum policy, which normally in welfare and environmental economics we normally talk about, specifically while extracting such scarce resources?
The one thing I think that resources will be exhausted is a long concept.
Long concept, okay.
First of all, see, like with the discovery of the shale gas.
Yes, shale gas, yes.
So I think easily we can assume that this kind of fossil fuel life will be extended under 100 to 200 years or more than that.
Right, okay.
So that's these things. Only thing we are not extracting coal also. There is enough reserve of the coal in India or other countries. Only we are not doesn't want to extract the coal. Two things. One is the cost making more high, or because of the pollution effect of construction. So it's because of that thing we may want to shift for this, not for the resources over. So that's it, things.
Okay.
Socially optimizing problem is that we have to take a balance between the cost of extractions and how much of the harmful effect it takes. Problem is on this kind of resources only extract is we don't look at the externality causes, damages we cause due to the extraction process. Like coal, oil, extract coal, it's a too much health impact is there. And these are not counted. Now the problem is that nowadays we become more conscious of the environment, we are able to incorporate this cost. And that's the cost of extraction becoming quite high, so we are not extracting coal. That's the simple like this. Because that's the reason we are not doing it. So I think, more this kind of, because some researchers may be not economically viable from the cost extraction point of view because of the health impact.
Okay, yeah.
It's not from the resources be exhausted. I don't think in next 300, 400 years, any of the fossil fuel will be extracted and be exhausted. It won't be true.
Okay. So it is probably then only about the matter of attaining much more alternative sources of energy that we are talking about, the near exhaustion problem that we always talk about, like in the next 50 years it is going to be exhausted. That is the common line and common statements that we find in various books and various news articles. However, this is something that we have proactively made a statement of, so that we can jump onto another alternative, or we can find some other alternative sources of energy, I think. So what is the scenario specifically because you are an expert about energy, and you have a lot of publications regarding climate change and energy and all that. Could you just suggest how India is coping up with the energy issue, or the alternative sources of energy issue? Because of course we are still now, as you stated, that in the next many years we are not going to exhaust any of the fossil fuels, but notwithstanding the fact that of course there would be environmental implications also. So what are the major options that we have in our country for attaining better and alternative sources of energy?
I think probably source of energy, whatever is there, if you don't know any fossil fuel, solar is the one kind of thing we are banking on.
Right.
I think solar and nuclear should be one thing, Pat. See, we don't have much potential of the on-land wind farm. If we do an onshore, if we do on sea wind farm, there is maybe potential, but not on land. We don't have a potential of wind energy.
Absolutely, yeah. So it
nuclear,
is only
we have
solar.
If you look at our goal of the nuclear plant, passed with a reactor, we does not lead to any pollution. This is one of the good, I think, can be substantiated if we want to shift from coal, fossil fuel to other, and solar, basically. The only problem with that see, we have to, solar can't operate by alone, because it gives electricity for 10 hours. So you have to side by side, we have to have something else has to be there.
Okay, so,
Which will balance it.
Okay, all right.
If wind cannot do it, nuclear could be one thing.
Okay, to back up the solar power.
Because usually the problem is any kind of thermal power station to initiate and the stopping is does take time. Like only gas is the other kind of power possibilities, gas-based turbine, which can be switched off and on quickly.
Okay.
Which you can't do the thermal kind of power station.
Oh, okay. All right.
Usually in other countries, they do balance between wind and solar, or wind and hydroelectric.
Right.
Like a small hydroelectric plant could be other thing where you can do this kind of option is there, broad grid balancing.
Right. But there has to be some amount of backup. We cannot just go with solar.
Yeah.
This is one of my almost last questions for you. So this is regarding the externalities that we hear about, specifically when we talk about environmental economics. Now, recently, there has been much a debate in different news articles and in the world about how ambiguous the property rights actually may cause global environmental externalities. We also have something like Coase theorem to back up this particular problem of ambiguous property rights, specifically when we learn about environmental economics. Now, could you, explain, or just in few words elaborate about the problem that happens when there are the property rights are quite ambiguous or they're uncertain in a way? how problems may arise?
I think best example to look at the air pollution case in Delhi.
Okay.
I mean, right to clean air.
Right to clean air.
That the problem is that we are not getting it because somebody else making the water air dirty.
Right.
And who owns the clean air? That's the problem. Simple case like that. So nobody owns it. It's ambiguous, right?
Right.
So
right.
you to blame it.
Absolutely.
So that is a basic, simple kind of thing. This kind of common property is there, which ownership is not clearly defined. And you can't enforce that these are the owner. You can identify the owners clearly.
Right. Identify the owners.
Because if your property is something which is one place, stock and barrel, so you can know this is the place location. But if this kind of common good problem is that it is maybe moving from one area to other, like air, clean air.
Clean air.
So dirty water is coming from Punjab to Delhi. I think this. So this is kind of simply case of this kind of global environment damages is coming it.
Right. Can we say that it is the problem of all the natural resources go through the problem of missing markets, wherein the price or the value of a certain natural resource cannot be ascertained, which is why we are not able to decide who is going to pay for it? Is it something like that also?
To some extent, too, valuation is not correctly done yet. Okay. But who will pay for the cost? That also another question is to be united.
Yeah, who's going to pay the cost?
Well, clean air, who will pay the cost? Should we pay or the people who are polluting it?
Right.
And or if you don't have to identify who are the polluter, that's another problem. If you know who are the polluter, then you can do it. But if you don't know who are the polluter, then it's very difficult to recover the cost from them.
Absolutely. Right. And so lastly, within this particular perspective of environmental economics, I would like to ask you the different issues of externalities. Now we talk about negative and positive externalities when we talk about environmental economics. And students have a hard time knowing what exactly is a negative externality and how exactly is it impacting, or what is the cause and effect relationship between externality and equilibrium, as we say. So, sir, could you just explain and suggest a few things for students so that they can better understand the concept of externalities with reference to environmental economics?
Now, suppose look at pollutions.
Right.
Suppose you are living in an upstream area and you are polluting the water, like industry in Delhi.
Okay.
And there are fishermen, some fishermen that downstream, say near Kanpur, etc., or this, whose life depend on fishing, etc.
Okay.
Now, if the river is polluted, fish will die. So this is an externality we are creating.
Right.
People of Delhi or industry are creating, and which are the livelihood of the fishermen whose lives depend on catching fishes.
Right.
So this is kind of a negative externality for them.
Right. Right.
And nobody is bearing about these things.
So the extra factors, let's say that with the same example of a negative externality, what the fishermen are going through, and because of the pollutants coming in the water and about the biomagnification that is happening, the fishes are going to die or probably are going to be of poor quality, let's say.
Poor quality. So the fishermen income is falling down with the pollution. So it's an external effect happening. Externality causing a livelihood impact.
And while calculating the price of fish, we are not taking into consideration.
No, we are not taking into this. And because nobody is compensated for their loss of income.
Right, nobody is compensated. So that becomes a huge problem.
That's a huge problem. It's a negative externality case of.
Right. So is there any case of a positive externality also? Because we would like to be also hopeful. Is there any case where there can also be a positive externality in reference to environmental, economics?
There are cases where often, for example, suppose if you use clean fuel, because now you are using Euro 6 fuels, right?
Yes.
As such, we as a consumer who are using the petrol car, they don't realize it. But when you use a clean fuel, our longevity increases. There are many COPD diseases won't come up.
Right.
incidence of COPD disease will decline because of the use of the green fuel. So these are very externality. Regarding positive externality, one of the examples you should see nowadays, all the Indian oil companies are selling Euro 6 fuel.
Right.
One of the advantage of the Euro 6 fuel that it reduces the incidence of COPD diseases.
Okay.
Which is a good kind of thing. So we drivers or who are using the automobile don't understand it. But probably this, in a sense, because of using COC, using Euro 6 fuels, our longevity is increasing to some extent. So we have to visit less to doctors because of the COPD diseases. This is kind of a perfect example of positive externality.
Okay, all right, yes. I think the hidden point or the bottom line in both the types of externalities with reference to environmental economics is if the compensation or if there is something given like a compensation with reference to negative externality, then the issue of externality will actually surface. Or if something like green fuel, as you were talking about, a certain type of branding and awareness about these incentives that might cause something like the 5-star and 4-star are still existing in the economy, but we want some more incentives so that people can actually go in for such energy consuming products and goods and services. So I think that was going to highlight the issue of externality to a certain level, and we can find a better future, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. Completely.
So this session was quite insightful actually, because students do demand for various concepts of environmental economics, and there's not enough theory or theoretical knowledge that is available, which is why it becomes a little harder for them to understand these different concepts and theories. And it was very delightful, very nice of you to really share your words of wisdom with these students. Last few words for the students as the words of encouragement.
I think it's a new concept. The environment economics is one of the things people less understood less.
Right.
By in general implication that many of the areas of the economics are not very clear because it is social science, not like a mathematics, etc. So many of the things what we say in theory doesn't happen really actually. That's one thing of the problem with the economics, because there are so many individuals. Each individual has different kind of objective functions.
Right.
What they want to do it, and it's very difficult to model this kind of things in a real life. And the environment is more difficult because the one thing we know what causes a bad environment, also not clearly.
That's also not clear, right? So it is, I think, all about research, more and more research.
Yeah, it's more of a black box now. Slowly you are trying to peeling up the one of the, like onion, we are peeling the one of the layers after layer, but we really don't know too much about it.
Right, absolutely. So thank you so much, sir, for coming on our platform. And we're really elated that you could actually share a few words of enlightenment because of your experience in environmental modeling and with your experience of environmental economics. You could share your valuable insights with us. So thank you so much for this session for today. Have a great day, sir, ahead.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.